DIY with Nancy. Today I'm going to share a recipe I love to make. It's easy to make, called Carne de Porco Alentejana or Carne Alentejana. It's generally made out of pork meat, potatoes, and clams. Very important step in this recipe is to marinate the pork meat for at least 10 to 12 hours, or you can keep it in the refrigerator overnight, or you can even keep it a little longer, like 24 hours. The longer it's in the marinade, the pork meat is in the marinade, the more it absorbs that flavor. And let me tell you, it makes a ton of difference in this dish. So stay with me and watch how to make Carne Alentejana or Carne de Porco Alentejana step by step. To get started, I have here 2 pounds of pork meat cut into cubes. And I had the butcher cut them into cubes for me, but you can easily buy some pork loin and then cut them into bite-sized pork loin pieces, just as you see it here. Now for the ingredients, I have here 1 tablespoon of Pimenta Moida. It's a homemade pepper sauce. 1 teaspoon of white pepper. 1 teaspoon of black pepper. Next I have salt, and I'll be using this to season the meat and the potatoes. 3 bay leaves. Here I have 4 cloves of garlic, finely chopped. 1 tablespoon of Pepperkika, which in Portuguese is called Colher. 1.5 cups of white wine, I set aside half a cup for later, and about 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. For the first step, I'm going to start marinating the meat. I'm going to start off with seasoning the pork meat with salt, and you can add a little more later. Next, I'm going to add the black pepper. To that, the white pepper. Next, I'm adding the Pepperkika. That's going to give it color and flavor. Next, I'm adding the hot pepper sauce. Next, I'm adding the finely chopped garlic, and you can add more cloves if you prefer. And once I have all the dry ingredients in the pork meat, I like to stir it to combine to make sure that the meat absorbs all the dry seasoning before I add the wet ingredients, which is the wine and the olive oil. Now I'm just stirring it to combine all the dry ingredients into the pork meat. And once I've combined all the dry ingredients, next I'm going to add the olive oil. So I'm just adding a couple tablespoons of olive oil, and I'm using extra virgin olive oil. Next, I'm going to add 1 cup of white wine. Pour it right in there. And the last ingredient, I'm adding 3 bay leaves, and I'm using dry bay leaves. I'm going to stir it to combine. I want to ensure that the pork meat absorbs all the marinade and is evenly combined. And once your marinade is all mixed into the pork meat, you're going to cover it with some plastic wrap. Place it into the refrigerator, and I'm going to be placing it for about 10 to 12 hours. You can also do it overnight. You want to ensure that this pork meat absorbs the flavor of the marinade. The pork meat's been marinating for about 12 hours, and I'm moving on to the next step. I have here 1 kilo of baby clams. I've placed them in a bowl with water to remove any excess sand. And they're little baby clams. They're perfect for this recipe. You can use larger clams as well. Now I'm just going to let the clams sit in the water. I'm going to salt it and set it aside and move on to the next step. For the next step, I'm going to prepare my potatoes. I have about 8 potatoes, range from small to medium, and I'm going to cut them into cubes. So let's move on to doing that. Now once again, I cut my potatoes into cubes, and I'm using a white rustic potato. It holds better, it's firmer, and it's a perfect potato to use for this Carne Alentejana dish. Now once you have your potatoes all cut up, here they are, you're ready for the next step. Now for the next step, I have here my deep fry pan, a side dish, a bowl for my potatoes, and my old-fashioned deep fryer to fry the potatoes. So now I'm going to start off by placing the stove on a medium heat, keep my oil nice and hot so I can get my potatoes ready. And on the deep fry pan where I'm going to prepare the pork meat, I'm placing about half a cup of extra virgin olive oil. Now before I place the pork meat in the fry pan, I want to make sure the olive oil is nice and hot. The pork meat is out of the refrigerator. I'm just going to mix all of the marinade into that pork meat. It's been sitting in the refrigerator for about 12 hours. So I'm going to mix that all together before I start frying up the pork meat. Now for the next step, the oil is really hot. I'm going to place the pork meat into the fry pan. Now I want both sides of the meat to be browned evenly, so I'm going to be doing this in 2 batches. Now while I have the pork meat on my fry pan and letting it brown on one side, I'm going to move on to the potatoes. Now my oil is nice and hot. I'm ready to place the potatoes into the oil and let them fry. And while the potatoes are frying, I'm going to multitask and keep my eye on the potatoes as well as the pork meat. I've had the pork meat on one side for a couple minutes. You can see it's starting to brown. I'm just going to flip them all over and leave them on the other side for a couple of minutes. And then once that's done, I'm going to place them right onto the side dish and place the second batch of pork meat in the fry pan. Now I have a side dish there just to place the meat. Once the first batch is ready, I'll eventually be placing all of the meat back in the fry pan. So I'm just going to place it onto the side dish and then move on to the second batch. And you can see that the juices of the marinade is left in the fry pan and there's so much flavor in there. So we're going to wait until the second batch is done and move on to the potatoes. They're ready. So I'm going to place them in a bowl with paper towel to drain the excess oil and start on the second batch of potatoes. Now once again, I'm going to check on the pork meat, make sure it's nice and seared and brown on one side, flip them over, and wait until they're evenly browned and seared on each side. Now the pork meat is all ready. I'm going to take the bowl that I set aside, place the meat right back inside the fry pan. Now the olive oil that was searing the meat, along with another half cup of white wine, is going to create the sauce and the flavors for this carne de Alentejana. Now I'm just mixing in the meat with the wine and the flavors and the sauce. The aroma that's in this kitchen is unbelievable. And the combination of this marinade is just even more tastier. So I want to make sure that I simmer the meat for a couple more minutes so I can get a beautiful sauce combined with the wine and the flavors of the marinade. And then I'll move on to the next step. Okay, let's check on the second batch of potatoes. They're ready. And now I'm just going to place them in the bowl to drain the excess oil and move on to the next step. Now I'm ready to add the clams. I've drained the water and the salt a few times just to ensure there's no sand in the clams. And now I'm ready to add it to the pork meat. Now I've placed a lot of clams, about 1 kilo of clams. If you really like clams, you can place more or less. It's totally up to you. And I'm just going to stir it to combine, make sure that all the juices are going to be mixed in to the clams. And then once you have that done, you're going to place the lid on and then you're going to let it simmer for about 5 to 8 minutes and we'll move on to the next step. Now before I add the potatoes, I'm going to season it with some salt. Don't forget to season your potatoes because they aren't seasoned when you place them in the fryer. I'm going to shake them up a little bit and then I'm going to get them ready and add them to the fry pan with the clams and the pork meat. Now it's been about 8 minutes. I'm ready to add the potatoes to the pork meat and the clams. So I'm just going to simply place the potatoes right on top, just like that, and just gently stir all the sauce with the clams and the pork meat in together with the potatoes, just as I'm doing here. And now for the final ingredient, I have about 3 tablespoons of chopped parsley, and I do use coriander on this as well, but unfortunately at the grocery store they didn't have the coriander, so I'm making do with what I have. So I'm just going to stir it to combine. You see all the juices in there, you want all those flavors on the potatoes and the clams and the pork meat. It smells amazing in this kitchen. And finally, for presentation, I like to drizzle a little more parsley right on top before I serve the carne de porco Alentejana. And my carne de porco Alentejana is ready to be served. It's a delicious Portuguese dish. porco Alentejana. Simple dish. The aroma that is coming out of this dish right now, it's absolutely making my mouth water. I can't wait to have dinner. I'm really looking forward to having this. I think everybody here at home is as well. I make this dish frequently. It's, like I said, it's fairly easy to make. Very important step to make sure you marinate your meat for at least 10 to 12 hours. You can marinate it longer. There's never any leftovers when I make this dish. It's absolutely delicious. The flavors that are in this dish just make you just want to have more as you're eating it. I hope you all enjoyed this recipe for carne de porco Alentejana or carne Alentejana. And if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, thanks so much for watching. Take care, everyone.